Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is July 4th, 2024. What is that? What? Thursday. Today's Thursday. Wow, I'm losing track of time here. July 4th, 2024. Happy birthday, America. Happy Independence Day. So, let's get on to the interesting stuff, the eerie stuff, the unusual, that kind of thing. And our first story is going to be out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled 43 Years Worth of Murders. In 2014, Samuel Little was convicted of the murders of 3 women in Los Angeles. DNA had linked them to cold cases committed between 1987 to 1989. He received 3 life sentences. Authorities suspected he probably committed other murders, but they never imagined what would be the final number once he decided to confess. Samuel Little's birth name was Samuel McDowell. He said his mother, a teenage prostitute, abandoned him. However, police believe she gave birth to him while she was in jail. The 1940 census shows that his mother, Bessie Mae Little, worked as a maid, and his father was Paul McDowell, age 19. The Little family moved to Ohio when he was an infant, and he was brought up by his maternal grandmother. As an adult, he said he had sexual fantasies about strangling women when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. In 1956, he was sent to an institution for juvenile offenders, and his mother was listed as whereabouts unknown on his intake papers. In the late 1960s, he moved to Florida to live with his mother, where he worked at a cemetery and an ambulance attendant. Between 1957 to 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes including theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials. Samuel Little, based on his confessions, is suspected to be one of the most prolific serial killers in the United States. He drew from memory 26 portraits of women he killed throughout his multiple decades of murder. Only 3 of them have been matched to a victim, and 13 remain unidentified. The FBI released the drawings, hoping to give names to these victims and close cold cases from around the country. Of the 93 women Little has confessed to killing, the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, has confirmed 50 of them. Little claims that he killed 20 people in Los Angeles alone. These murders were committed between 1970 to 2005. Identifying these victims is complicated, not only because of Little's faulty recall of dates, but that most of them lived on the margin of society. They were prostitutes, drug addicts, and transgendered individuals that did not come up on the radar when they disappeared. Little strangled his victims and would dump them in wooded areas. Without obvious injuries to cause death like a gunshot or knife wound, their deaths were blamed on overdoses. Now, some of the confessions that basically closed cold cases, one of them was for Julia Critchfield's body was found in 1978. She was strangled and thrown off a cliff into a dirt pile in the north end of Saucier, Mississippi. Her case was unsolved for 40 years. Little eventually confessed to her murder. Denise Brothers was strangled, and her body was dumped on the outskirts of Odessa, Texas in 1994. Leads dried up, and it became a cold case until the summer of 2018, when Little's DNA was connected to the crime. He was indicted and transferred to Texas. James Holland, a Texas Ranger, struck up a rapport with Little. Whether it was due to his age or the fact that he knew he would spend the rest of his life in prison, Little told him more than what authorities hoped for or even suspected. He told Holland that he had committed 90 murders throughout the United States between 1970 and 2013. If these figures are accurate, it would make him one of the most prolific serial killers this country has ever apprehended. He would outstrip Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Little also used the alias of Samuel McDowell. Unlike other murderers that claim killings that are not their own, since his confession, he has been linked to 30 different unsolved crimes. Law enforcement departments from across the country sent officials to his jail cell, hoping they could close some of their cold cases. Standing at 6'3", was committing crime since he was 16 years old. Before his death, he was bound to a wheelchair. However, in his youth, he led a vagabond life, living a trail of carnage and death in his wake. Little targeted prostitutes and drug addicts. He would punch them into unconsciousness and then strangle them while he masturbated. No doubt due to the risky lifestyle of his victims, it wasn't until 1976 that he came to the attention of authorities in St. Louis. Pamela Smith, a drug addict, naked below the waist, started to bang the door of a random house. Her hands were bound behind her back with an electrical cord. She told police that a man fitting Little's description had beaten and raped her before she was able to escape. Police arrested Little as he was found in a car matching the description given by Smith. Her clothes were inside the vehicle. He told police that he had only beat her. He was released in December 1976 after only serving 3 months. Throughout the years after his arrest in St. Louis, he would run into trouble for the same pattern of violent attacks on women. He managed to always squeeze free. Little was a loner who led a nomadic lifestyle, with no fixed address, which no doubt made it difficult for law enforcement to tie him to crimes that eventually became cold cases. Little's first known victim was Mary Gertrude Brosley. She was last seen on June 12, 1970, when she abandoned her 7-year-old son, supposedly, to travel to Boston. Mary, who battled alcoholism, failed to return home after 2 weeks and was reported missing by her family. Her sister would go on to describe that she would take rides with anyone who would offer her alcohol. Mary crossed paths with Samuel Little at a bar in Miami on December 31, 1970. Her body was found 3 weeks later, but not identified until 2017. Melinda Lepre's body was discovered in a cemetery in Pascagoula, Mississippi. She was last seen with Little. When the police investigated, 2 other prostitutes told them that Little had attacked them. He was arrested for the murder in 1982. However, a grand jury failed to indict him on the charges and he was set free. He would go on to confess to the murders once he was behind bars. Police would go on to tie him to the 1982 murder of Rosie Hill. Her strangled body was found in the woods near a hog pen in Ocala. An investigator from Marion County Sheriff's Office interviewed Little about Rosie Hill's murder many years later. He confessed only after an agreement not to be prosecuted for it. Little was asked as to why he killed the woman. He advised that God put him on this earth to do what he was doing. Once free, he headed to the other side of the country, and in October 1984, he was charged with attacking a San Diego woman. He ended up pleading guilty to assault and false imprisonment after the jury deadlocked on the charge of attempted murder. A scant 2.5 years later, he was once again free to kill more women. The bodies piled up quickly. Carol Alford was found in a Los Angeles alley in 1987. Audrey Nelson was found in a trash can in 1989. The same year, Guadalupe Apodaka's remains turned up in an abandoned building. It wasn't until April 2012 that DNA linked Little to all 3 murders. Investigators cautioned that this killer's newfound openness should not be read as remorse. Little said about his victims, "They was broke and homeless, and they walked right into my spider web. I didn't pick on that mother effers. That would be missed. There weren't no women nurses and teachers. That's the reason I didn't get busted a long time ago." In 2014, he went on trial and he was convicted. He was sentenced to 3 life terms, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life in prison. 2 unsolved murders in Macon, Georgia were attributed to him. A Jane Doe found in 1977 and the strangling murder of Fredonia Smith in 1982. Authorities in Russell, Alabama, closed a cold case for the 1979 murder of Brenda Alexander, age 23. Investigators told police that Little described that he picked her up at a local disco, and he wrung his hands together, smiled, and said, "I knew she was mine." Little confessed to 3 murders in Louisiana. Dorothy Richard, 55, in 1982, Melissa Thomas, 29, and Daisy McGuire, 40, both in 1996. The officials of the jurisdictions could now close these cold cases, but faced a quandary of whether they should prosecute a 79-year-old who was in poor health and set to spend the rest of his life in prison. Perhaps knowing the identity of their killer was the only solace their family would receive. After 2018, Little provided more than 700 hours of recorded interviews with police. So far, his total stands at 93 murders, most of them from strangulation. He produced clumsy drawings from his memory to aid police. However, many of them are unknown because he never knew their names to begin with. Different police officials who interviewed him found he was 100% credible. More than 50 victims were identified. Other victims, claimed by Little, remain unfound. Despite his confessions and his credibility in total, he was only charged and convicted for 8 murders. Aurelia Jean Dorsey, now deceased, was Little's longtime girlfriend who shoplifted to financially support both of them. They were together until she died in 1988 from a brain hemorrhage. She was 27 years older than him. Little died December 30th, 2020, from complications of diabetes and heart problems. What begs to be asked is how the legal system failed all these victims who set Samuel Little free time after time. Which, by the way, is a very good question. Was it because his victims were prostitutes, drug addicts? Like he said, he didn't go after nurses and teachers. Or anybody, people be like, excited and what? These poor... Excuse me. And, and again, even when he went to court, I don't understand. I want to say, if I would have been on any of those juries and I find out after the fact all the horrible things that this man went on to do because he wasn't convicted, I'd feel guilty. I'd feel guilty. Because really, the system failed these women. The ones that he had killed and the ones that he had yet to kill. How's that? But there he goes. And he just died of old age, in the jailhouse. And again, like not all, but most of these killers have a very sad childhood. Next story is also from Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled The Mystery of the Beeswax Shipwreck. A discovery of ancient beeswax found on the Oregonian coast at Nehalem was reported in the newspapers throughout the years. It was assumed it came from a wrecked vessel that foundered on its way to a Catholic monastery in California. The wax was etched with Latin words. During the 1800s, there were different theories where chunks of beeswax washing on shore were coming from. First, it was assumed it might have come from the ship Peacock, wrecked on the Nehalem Bay sandpit. It carried beeswax among its cargo, which was strewn along the beach. However, William Savage, a pioneer in the area during the 1840s, said the brig of war Peacock was wrecked at the mouth of Columbia River in 1842. Then there was controversy if it was beeswax or mineral wax. However, the wing of a bee was found embedded in the wax, providing evidence of its origins. By 1922, it was reported that chunks of beeswax were sent by Emil G. Goodell of Manzanita to the Oregon Agricultural College for further examination. In 1961, the Shell Oil Company issued a report stating the beeswax found in the sand dune of Nehalem Bay Peninsula. It's Nehalem Peninsula were about 430 years old. They tested a specimen at their laboratory in Texas after it was sent to them by the Tillamook County Chamber of Commerce. Some believed it came from the cargo of the San Francisco Xavier, a Spanish galleon which wrecked in 1705 as it was headed from Mexico to the Philippines. Dr. Cook, who taught at Castleton's Teachers College in Vermont and was in the process of writing a book titled The Spanish in the Pacific Northwest, saw a picture in the newspapers of Alex Walker holding a piece of beeswax he had found. He said, "From the markings, it is undoubtedly from a Spanish ship which visited the area in the early days. It appears to be one of the largest and best preserved pieces in existence." He said that beeswax was once found along the coast in large quantities, but it was destroyed by those who didn't realize what they had found. These specimens came from Spanish ships wrecked off the coast. The mystery was tied to the name of the ship. In the summer of 1693, Santo Cristo de Burgos left Manila, then a Spanish colony, on what was supposed to be a normal trading voyage. The galleon had filled its hold with beeswax, Chinese porcelain, and silk bound for Mexico. Somewhere in the northern Pacific, it ran into some type of disaster. It sailed into oblivion until 2022. 7 years later, an earthquake measuring 9.0 on the Richter scale swallowed part of the Oregon coastline and then returned it inside a tsunami. This event was known as the Great Cascadia Earthquake. The galleon and its cargo were thrown onto the coastline, among all the other debris returned to the shore. The Maritime Archaeological Society, or MAS, researched legends of a burning ship and its survivors retold by the Nehalem Indians. It involves tales of lost treasure and locals finding pieces of Chinese porcelain shards along the shoreline. According to the oral histories of the Indians, crewmen from the ship lived with them for some time, leaving descendants who are in the area until this day. Other stories contradict this version, in which the crew who survived the wreck were killed by the natives. According to Spanish naval records, 2 galleons were lost during these years. It was the Santo Cristo de Burgos sailing from Manila to Acapulco, and the San Francisco's Xavier, lost in 1705. However, examination of a large wooden timbers recovered in coastal sea caves find they date to before the tsunami. Radiocarbon dating on the wood indicate it was built in the 1650s from Asian lumber, ruling out the San Francisco Xavier. The earliest reference to the wreck date back to 1813, when fur trader Alexander Henry said the local Claptop tribe were trading large amounts of beeswax. They said it came from a shipwreck near Nehalem Bay. Teak from the ship's timber were used to build furniture and souvenirs. Much of the beeswax was marked with Spanish shipping symbols, and wings of bees native to the Philippines were found trapped in the wax. It is a mystery why the galleon was sailing off the coast of Oregon, north of its route to Mexico, unless it was damaged and drifted off course. In 2006, a group of archaeologists from the Maritime Archaeology Society started the Beeswax Wreck Research Project, using the shards of Chinese porcelain recovered thus far by beachcombers. Examination of the porcelain proved they came from the Zhangzi period of the late 17th century, which corresponded with the time period the ships were sailing between Manila and Mexico. A group of volunteers were looking for clues through the local lore that had accumulated through the years about the Beeswax wreck. Ronald Spores, a professor at Vanderbilt University, was part of the group, and in 2018, while reviewing 17th century records from Spain, he found the personnel manifest of the ship. There were 231 persons on board on its last voyage. There were 215 officers and crew members. 62 weren't Spanish but Creoles from the Philippines, China, Malaysia, and other cultures. There were only 16 passengers, composed of 6 priests of the Augustinian, Dominican, and Jesuit orders, as well as merchants and military men. There were no women. The Santo Cristo de Burgos was built in 1687 or 1688 at the Spanish shipyard of Sorsogon on the island of Bagatao in the Philippines, and probably had a cargo space in excess of 1,000 tons. Its exact dimensions are unknown. It plied the Manila trade route used by Spain from 1565 to 1815. The Spanish ships traversed 12,000 miles from Asia to New Spain, which is now Mexico, laden with Chinese silks, ivory figurines, spices, and lacquer furniture. The ship was captained by Don Bernardo Eñiguez del Valle y de Pradilla. He came from a noble Basque family, was a member of the Knights of Santiago, and served in 1686 as the mayor of the mining town San Luis de Potosi in Mexico. He then headed the cavalry of Mexico City. By the spring of 1691, he sailed on the ship to the Philippines, but the following year it encountered a furious storm that sent it back to port in the Philippines with 3 broken masts. An investigation cleared the captain of responsibility, but most of the officers faced the end of their maritime careers. Some were banished and others imprisoned. This was punishment for the tremendous loss of revenue when the voyage could not be completed. The ship sailed from the Philippines in 1693, short of about 30 crew members. Why it wrecked is unknown. Was it another storm or inadequate repairs? There was also scurvy among the crew. There is an oral tradition in which survivors, some which sported long ponytails, possibly the non-Spanish crew, made it to the shore. In a tantalizing clue, a rock at Oswald State Park, south of Manzanita, has the initials HM carved in old-style lettering into it. One of the crew was named Hernando Muñoz. Was this him? Could the story be accurate that all who survived and made it to the beach were killed? Or were they instead integrated into the tribes, leaving descendants in the area? In 1915, an article described where primitive Spanish cannon had been found 9 miles north of Nehalem Bay in what became known as Cannon Beach. There was another account of a second cannon found on Nehalem Bay Beach. What became of the cannons after their discovery is unknown. In 2013, Craig Andes, a beachcomber, found timber sticking out of the sand in caves, which initially no one believed belonged to a shipwreck. It turned out he was right. In 2022, more pieces were recovered and are the first clue of physical evidence to confirm his existence. Lest you believe the loss of the Spanish galleon was a rare occurrence, more than 2,000 ships have been lost where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. The Abandoned Shipwreck Act of 1987 protects shipwrecks and gave ownership within 3 miles of the American coastline to the state adjacent to where it was found. So, for example, if you're a diver or beachcomber and you come across any part of a new wreck along the Oregon coast, you would be cheated of your find by this law since it belongs to Oregon. One exception is the Sunken Military Craft Act of 2004, which preserves the sovereign status of sunken U.S. military vessels and aircraft, regardless of how much time has passed. The numerous stories circulated about the lost ship caught the attention of director Steven Spielberg. This was the jumping-off point for the idea behind the 1985 movie, The Goonies, where a group of kids use a map to find the hidden treasure left behind by One-Eyed Willie, a 17th century pirate. So yes, if you find something, guess what? It's not yours. It's going to belong to, like they say, whatever state within 3 miles if you find it out in the water. Let me tell you something, and that's why I think sometimes you hear about these private, I don't know, archaeological digs or excursions that go there, and I know that they watch them in case they find something. But yeah, this thing that it doesn't belong to found it. That finders keeper thing, that doesn't work with that with stuff like this. All right, let's get on to the next story. This is really interesting. This is, and maybe some of you have heard about this new monolith that popped up now in Colorado. This is out of the Colorado Sun. It's titled "A Mysterious Monolith Appeared in Rural Colorado. Do we really want to know where it came from?" Well, yeah. Bellevue, on top of a hill prickly with dry grass and cacti, a 4-sided structure that looks like the sky, the hills, and the small crowd of people standing next to it, but it's none of those things. It's not a riddle, it's a monolith. Perhaps the 247th spotted worldwide since 2020. I did not know that. It appeared unexpectedly on Sunday in Bellevue, northwest of Fort Collins, on the expansive property of Rob and Lori Graves, who own Morning Fresh Dairy Farm, a Noosa yogurt factory, and the Howling Cow Cafe. A cafe manager spotted the structure in the distance as she arrived at work in the morning, but didn't think anything of it until a customer came in and asked to be pointed toward the alien structure. The Howling Cow had been part of the farm property since 2014 and has become a popular cycling stop that serves the dairy's fresh creams and yogurts. As of Monday, though, it became the gathering place for bagel sandwiches and hypotheses about alien life. On a chalkboard menu, drink names have been given an extraterrestrial spin. Order the Beam Me Up for a cold brew with a double shot, or Radio Wave for an Italian soda with cold foam. The monthly ice cream flavor, Orange Juice Shake, has been relabeled the Cow Abduction. Alien figures drawn on the menu have thought bubbles that read beep, beep, boop, beep. They probably just weren't getting enough business, one diner offered. Marketing ploy or not, the shiny metal monolith bolted to a slab of concrete certainly hasn't hurt business. By 11 a.m. Thursday, a line had formed in the cafe from the counter to the door, a dozen customers long, and didn't let up until well after noon. A second rush arrived around 2 p.m. "Been busy?" a customer asked the barista from the line. The barista nodded and laughed. "Where's the monolith?" she said mockingly. Then she softened. "Actually, it's kind of cool. I just can't say that word anymore." Then she pushed a milky green beverage onto the counter, crop circled. She yelled into the crowd. The cafe's new name for a matcha latte with vanilla. The monolith mysteries began in November 2020. This for monolith number one, when a crew from the Utah Department of Public Safety was flying over remote desert backcountry, counting bighorn sheep. They spotted an unusual metal gleam deep in a slot canyon and landed the helicopter to investigate. There they found the first mysteriously placed monolith, a roughly 10-foot tall prism lodged into the red earth. Photos and videos from the incident were posted to the agency's blog. Please don't try and visit the site, as the road is not suitable for most Earth-based vehicles. But this was late 2020, 6 months into deep pandemic isolation. Internet sleuthing was at an all-time high, and the prospect of visiting a remote site in the desert where few people had been and were unlikely to be was simply too tempting. A subreddit sprung up, Find the Monolith, and more than 3,000 people joined it to theorize about its origin and locate the Utah phenomena. In less than 24 hours, a location was pinpointed and posted to Reddit, and some users used Google Earth imagery to determine that it was placed sometime in late 2015 or early 2016. To some, the timeline added to the appeal of the piece. It was still possible, in an age of satellite imagery and social media stunts, to leave a mark that went completely undetected for years. Less than 2 weeks later, after its viral debut, the monolith was gone, hauled away in the night by a group of 4 men concerned with the environmental impact of so many visitors on the delicate Utah backcountry. But when the men trucked the monolith out of the desert, something strange was happening halfway around the world. The same day the Utah monolith came down, a second monolith was reported on a plateau near Piatra Neamt in Romania. Days later, a third popped up in Atascadero, California. Over the course of 2020, dozens more monoliths were reported to monolithtracker.com, a mix of hastily placed copycats and S-class monoliths or significant monoliths, well made with zero explanations of appearance according to the website's 6-part classification system. The original Utah monolith and the quick Romanian follow-up are 2 of 3 S-class monoliths in the world. The third appeared in Spain in April 2021. According to the Associated Press, the Bureau of Land Management is still actively investigating the Utah case. In Colorado, 3 monoliths have been spotted and reported to the site. The first showed up in December 2020 at the spaceport in Watkins. It was reported to have been fabricated by Bill Zempel, the owner of neighboring Mile High Aircraft Services, making it a K-class monolith, or a monolith of known origin. The next 2 showed up days later at Sunlight Mountain near Glenwood Springs and Chautauqua Park in Boulder. Though their origin hasn't yet been determined, they are deemed Q-class, or questionable monoliths, likely to be knockoffs considering their origin or appearance. Monolith spotting slowed down in 2021, and the site went all but dormant until March this year, when one showed up in Wales. Earlier this month, a second monolith appeared outside of Las Vegas, but was promptly removed by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department just a day before the one showed up at the dairy in Bellevue. The Las Vegas and Bellevue monoliths have not yet been classified. I know a lot of people are in a hurry to get here because they're afraid it's going to disappear, Graves said. I kind of hope it stays. I mean, it's kind of pretty. There are a lot of maybes that hover around monoliths. Maybe it's an ad. Maybe it's a TV prop. Maybe it was placed there by a prankster, an artist, a mischievous neighbor, the U.S. government. Maybe it was placed on Earth by aliens. Maybe we're the aliens. Of course, part of the fascination depends on not having the answer to its origin. The most likely maybe with the monoliths is that maybe few people want to know in the first place. By Thursday afternoon, Graves was getting reports that some Instagram commentators had turned against the monolith. Not so favorable post, one of the baristas texted her. I didn't even know we had a picture of it on Instagram, Graves said. Meanwhile, a steady stream of visitors made their way up the hill, took photos with it, speculated about whether it would be struck by lightning or start a wildfire. The baristas, for their part, were feeling worked, despite having bumped their staffing up to accommodate the week-long rush. They were out of sandwich bread. A compressor was on the fritz. We can't really sustain this, Graves said. I think it's going to be a blip. But until the hype dies down or the pillar gets beamed up, the Howling Cow Cafe will keep serving monolith mochas. Yep. And, it makes you, to manufacture this thing and put it wherever in all these places, that's very interesting. And not get, you know what? I take that back. Some of these things are literally in the middle of nowhere. I can see where, who's going to notice? Anyway, I'm going to... This is a story out of my Substack at MP Pellicer. And this is titled The Shadow of Evil. A course on the Ministry of Exorcism and Deliverance was held in Rome the week of May 6, 2024. These lectures were instituted based on a demand for trained exorcists. In 2018, the Vatican hosted a week-long training for exorcists at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome, claiming more instruction was necessary due to the rising demand for more exorcists. Father Cesare Trucchi said, "Today, we are at a stage crucial in history. Many Christians no longer believe in the devil's existence. Few exorcists are appointed, and there are no more young priests willing to learn." According to Benigno Paglia, an exorcist from Sicily, there are 500,000 alleged cases of demonic possession or activity every year in Italy. He cited that many cases of possession is psychological issues, which is why well-trained exorcists were needed. He claimed that most priests are not prepared to discern when they find themselves in this situation. Father Pedro Barajón Muñoz, who is a professor of theology and presents the lecture Angels and Demons in Sacred Scripture and the Magisterium of the Church, blames social media, he said. They can promise satanic practices and occult rites through dedicated sites, while in the past it was harder to popularize. The series of lectures entitled Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation was first held in 2005. The Latin Church Bishops of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops approved the English translation of De Exorcismis and Supplicationibus Quis Budam, Edito Typica, in November 2014. The final text of exorcism and related supplications was confirmed by the Holy See in December 2016 and implemented in the Diocese of the United States as of June 29, 2017. Other lectures presented at the 2024 training were The Extraordinary Action of the Evil One, Criteria for Discernment, Exorcism and Prayer of Deliverance in the Context of the Afro-Brazilian Magical Rites, Satanism in Music, Exorcism in Film, Symbols in Magical Occult and Satanic Rituals, Pedophilia and Pedopornography in relation to occult and satanic rites. It took the Catholic Church almost 400 years to update the rules pertaining to exorcism. It was only in 1999 when instructions were modified since 1614 to distinguish between demonic possession and physical or psychological illness. And these are cases of satanic suicide or possession, mental illness, or both. In January 2018, Lilia Butsiva, 23 from Bulgaria, was reported missing by her family 6 months before. Interpol was notified, however, the search was called off after she was found by authorities in Erfurt, Germany. She had been studying in Germany prior to this. On New Year's Eve, it was reported by the owner of a vacation room in the village of Valakta on the island of Kefalonia, who discovered her body along with a German man, 30, a top executive with Germany's Deutsche Bank, whose name was withheld. The couple traveled to Greece in a car with a fake plate, which the man had rented in Germany. They had been staying there since December 26. The coroner, Angeliki Ciola, reported the woman cut herself with a blade in several places which bled profusely. She had multiple healed scars indicating she had participated in similar rituals before. The man then sat in a water-filled bathtub, cut his veins, and then put a knife through his heart. Knives, candles, and a satanic pentagram were found at the scene. According to Greek authorities, the suicide appeared to have taken place during a New Year's Eve satanic ceremony. There's a 24-hour time frame before the first full moon which is associated with satanic sacrifices. A note was found written in the man's handwriting that read, quote, "Our unsuccessful mission has ended. Bitcoin is now the future. I return to my Lord Satan, whom I have failed." End quote. Until today's date, the man's identity and photograph are still carefully protected and cannot be found. The other one, this is titled "A Case of Virgin Sacrifice." On June 2nd, 2016, 2 days after he disappeared, it was reported that the body of Mario or Marito Agustin Salto, age 11, was found in plastic garbage bags 4 miles outside of Quimili in Santiago del Estero, Argentina. He was last seen on May 31st when he left on his bike to go fishing. He had been raped and dismembered in what was later described as a satanic ritual. His head was found in a separate bag from his torso and extremities and was discovered by a dog who had dragged out one of his legs. Forensic examination found he was tortured by strangulation with a metal wire. He was also sodomized and his legs cut off while he was still alive, causing him to bleed to death. His genitals and fifth vertebrae were missing. This is a part of the lumbar spine, which is located in the lower back region of the human body. DNA was also recovered from the child's remains. Canine dogs were used in the investigation, led authorities to the house of a man who lived in the area. The dogs found a notebook with mention of the boy's name and a bloodied underwear that belonged to him. It contained semen. An altar to Santa Muerte was found. This deity is a skeletal folk saint venerated in Paraguay, northeastern Argentina, and southern Brazil. The canine also led to a diagram depicting a 7-headed beast with the use of the numeration 666. There was a drawing of a child tied and hung from a branch. Below was the unbalanced image of the iconic figure of justice. There was mention in the paper of a virgin sacrifice. The intent was to obtain his energy and spirit. There was also drawn an eye within a triangle, which corresponds to the animated depiction in Disney's Gravity Falls. The authorities took DNA samples from 3,400 residents of Quimili and neighboring towns during the lengthy investigation. However, none of the samples matched the DNA belonging to 2 suspects found on the young victim's body. They both belonged to the same family and had both raped a boy. The items belonged to Miguel Angel Jimenez, 58, who ironically had participated in marches asking for justice in the case of Marito Salto after the discovery of his body. He fathered 11 children throughout the community. He was a supposed benefactor to the village. However, there were whispers that he was called El Brujo or El Terrible. In his yard, a dog had been sacrificed. The desiccated carcass was still hanging from a tree. 4 years later, there were 11 people accused of the murder. They were Miguel Angel Jimenez, Ramón Enrique Ocaranza, Daniel Gaston Ocaranza, Miguel Angel María Jimenez, which is the son of El Brujo. Brujo translates to the warlock. María Eugenia Montes, Gustavo Hernández, and Arminda Diaz. Arminda was El Brujo's girlfriend. She was a director of the school in Quimili that Marito attended. Other participants were Ramón Eduardo Rodríguez, Rodolfo Adrián Sequeira, and Daniel Tomás Sosa. Written notes were found in Arminda Diaz's drawer reading, "I already have his virility, his youth, his strength. Give me what I ask for and give me your strength, 666. The case dragged on for more than 5 years. In September 2022, Rodolfo Sequeira and Miguel Angel Jimenez were sentenced to life in prison. Prior to this, Ramón Rodríguez was sentenced to 11 years for being secondary participant in the crime, kidnapping, and sexual abuse. Gustavo Hernández and Daniel Sosa were released. The remaining participants were sentenced to 3 years each. The defense lawyers said the murder was committed by drug traffickers, saying the murder of the child was a message sent to Marito's uncle Marcelo Salto, who was involved in anti-drug operations. One of Marito's aunts said it wasn't by chance the demonic cult of Santa Muerte grew there and chose this specific victim. She insists she wants to know what they got in exchange for the child's life. In one of the letters found at the Santa Muerte altar, it read, "Give me what I ask for." No one has answered that question. Yeah, what did they want? That's horrible. And one's a supposed benefactor, and he's out there looking for the child, and the other one's a director of the school that he attends. I'm telling you. Incredible. All right, let's go back to Stranger Than Fiction stories. This is now that we're on the subject of child sacrifice. Who were the children selected for sacrifice by the Maya? DNA has been used to solve recent cold cases, but now it's being used to expose the horrific killing of children 1,000 years ago by the Maya at Chichen Itza. In 1967, an underground body of water known as a chultung or cenote was discovered at Chichen Itza. This is an ancient Mayan city located on the Yucatan Peninsula that covers 4 square miles. In the underground cistern were the remains of what was believed to be young women, but were in reality very young children. Ceramic and clay objects as well as animal bones were unearthed in the cave. The discovery was made during the construction of a new runway close to El Castillo, which is a pyramid nearly 100 feet tall and less than a third of a mile from the cenote. This structure is also known as the Temple of Kukulkan. Prior to this, ritual killings were known to have taken place at Chichen Itza, evident from remains of both sacrificed people and art, including skull racks or trophy racks, which were found near the site of the Templo Mayor, which is present-day Mexico City. The human bones were dated back to 800 AD to 1100 AD, during the peak of the Mayan influence in the city, even though the city was built approximately 1,500 years ago. Subterranean areas that are filled with rain and water are associated with child sacrifice, since they are viewed as portals to the Maya underworld. Early investigations dating to the time of the conquistadors and early 20th century posited the remains belonged to young women, but recent examination of the remains conclude they belong to male sacrificial victims. There are some remains that cannot be exactly identified as male or female since they were so young, 3 to 6 years of age, when they were killed. Spanish descriptions dating back to the 16th century said that children were kidnapped, purchased, or exchanged for gifts. There were some remains whose origins have been traced to Honduras or central Mexico. The genomes of 64 children interred near the sacred cenote were compared to 68 Maya inhabitants of the nearby town of Tixcaca Tuyub. The results are that the Chutun children were mostly male and closely related to one another, which included 2 sets of identical twins. Chances are they were sacrificed in pairs. This suggests that children were selected for their close biological kinship, and only 2/3 of the remains were examined, which indicates chances are the percentage of kinship is higher than what has been found so far. An examination of the diet of the sacrificed children show they are not from the elites, who had greater variability in what they ate. The sacrifice of the boys was a public event where they were killed with axes, spears, or knives, and then their bodies were secreted in the underground chamber. Twin sacrifices are sacred in the Popol Vuh, a Mayan sacred text in which the twins Hun Hunappu and Vukub Hunappu are sacrificed by the gods after they descend into the underworld and are defeated in a ball game. Hun Hunappu's head is hung in a calabash tree where it impregnates a virgin who gives birth to a set of twins known as the hero twins, who avenged their father and uncle. The ancestors of the Maya first moved into the region around 900 years ago. Genetic comparisons of the remains found in the Chultun shows no signs of admixture to populations from Africa, Europe, Oceania, and the Americas. The comparison to current populations of Tixcaca Tuyub found their mtDNA haplogroups are indigenous American. However, more than 50 are non-indigenous American, mostly European and Middle Eastern and Mediterranean origin. John Verano, a bioarchaeologist at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana, who studies human sacrifice, said, "The killing of captives, even in a ritual context, is a strong political statement. It is a way to demonstrate power and political influence, and some people have said it's a way to control your own population. This suggests that sacrifices were masked within a religious context, but were more a form of psychological and physical control over the population and neighboring tribes. Part of the complex at Chichen Itza is an area believed to have been used to play a ball game. This game was played throughout Mesoamerica with a 10-pound hard rubber ball. According to the Popol Vuh lords of the underworld and humans battled each other by playing this game. The ball court was a portal to Ixbalba, which was the underground. In some instances, the game substituted for warfare, and captives of war were forced to play. The loser would be sacrificed. Boy, talk about motivation to win. There are even depictions of ball players playing with the heads of the losers. The Spanish conquistadors reported that players could be hurt very badly by the ball, which was extremely hard. You imagine, we're gonna. If you lose your head. Oh, that's the best motivator I've ever heard of. All right, so come to the end of this section of Eerie News, but I will be back soon because believe me, there's a lot of weird stuff going on out there. I just got to put it together, but I'll be seeing you all very, very soon. Till next time.